4. But for me, green-white aggro is one of the decks that benefits the most from having access to City of Brass. It has both green and white mana demands very early on in the game, is very aggressive, can sideboard into Unflinching Courage to mitigate some of the life loss. It has, you know, all the tools really necessary to be a good mana confluence deck.
Temple of Playing to begin here for Corvese. You see Kurt Crane on your right, just playing blue-white control. So we talked about how Revelation decks may not have been the best choice this weekend. Crane having a good weekend thus far with a couple copies of Azorius Guildgate before moving along here. Corvese with green-white. This is, you know, kind of, honestly, like the block matchup that we saw for Pro Tour Dragon's Maze. Now, of course, you know, there were some people playing blue-white, some people playing Esper, but kind of the same philosophies basically apply here. You got the green-white deck, which is surprisingly good against the blue-white control deck.
Yeah, you have some good power to mana cost threats, and that's important for attacking in general and for beating Jace. And then you also have some specifically problematic cards like Voice of Resurgence. Some builds play Avenue of the Worm. Now Harry has access to Mutavault, so you have a mixture of good pressure and then some troubling threats.
Corvese going to play a Mutavault and another copy of Voice of Resurgence here against Crane. You see Crane's hand, he's got a lot of lands over there, a Dissolve, and it looks like an Elspeth as well. So a Temple of Enlightenment's going to put the top card to the bottom before, it looks like passing it back over to Corvese. You saw Detention Sphere take care of that first copy of Voice of Resurgence. Harry does have a way to get that voice back, though. Does have 4 copies of Banishing Light in his deck.
And on Kurt's side, the only new card in his main deck is a single copy of Banishing Light. We see 0 copies of Deicide in his list, 0 creatures also, just 2 Elspeths, 4 copies of Jace, and 1 Elixir of Immortality win the game. Excuse me, also 1 copy of Jace Memory Adept in the main deck.
Okay. Mutavault going to get fired up here. We're going to see an attack here for 4. No Azorius Charms or anything of that nature. So Corvese is going to put Crane down to 16. We'll see if there's a follow-up play here for Harry at all. He's just going to pass the turn back and represent Celestia Charm and Brave the Elements. And that is correct, Brave the Elements in his green-white aggro deck. He'll take a look at his creatures, locks it on Smiter, Fleecemane, Lion, Voice of Resurgence, Stride, Militant, Soldier of the Pantheon, Bramaz, King of Oreskos. Those are all white creatures.
And you and I were talking about a list along these lines all the way back at Grand Prix Albuquerque. Could you play all the Selesnya creatures that are green and white alongside Brave the Elements? And here we are finally seeing that deck exist and perform well in this event.
Harry does make a redo token on the end step. That'll be a 2/2 Vigilance Knight. You see 2 Mutavaults here for Corvese as well. Crane, 2 copies of Dissolve, and Elspeth, and not much else. Corvese going to fire up his Mutavaults and come into the red zone yet again here.
I think Harry is correctly identifying that Kurt has some sort of counterspell in his hand, is trying his best not to play into it.
Crane going to draw a card. It's a copy of Mutavault for him. You can see that he's moved Elspeth to the front of his hand, and he will cast the Planeswalker. And that's going to come in. We'll get 3 tokens out here for you guys in just a moment as well.
Get a more visible die on the screen as well.
It might be the smallest die in recorded history.
Yeah. You'd be better off just putting some loose change on it.
There are your 3 soldiers. And Corvese will untap. He will take a draw. Now, as good as Brave the Elements is, it's not going to be lethal right now, because the Mutavaults are not white creatures.
But it's unclear if Harry's going to get another shot at it. You see Kurt, he has a Mutavault in play. That's insurance against Brave the Elements. Harry's already demonstrated the instinct here that Kurt has some sort of counterspell in his hand, so it's not clear if he's going to get really another shot to Brave.
You see Mutavault's going to get fired up. Same attack as we saw last time. Not sure exactly where everything is going. We'll find out. Looks like we'll see some blocks and things of that nature. So it should become pretty clear in just a moment here.
It feels like a fool's errand to try to kill Elspeth from this spot here. So yeah. I imagine Harry's going right at Kurt, and you see exactly that.
Voice of Resurgence will get double blocked. It'll die. An Elemental token will come into play here in just a moment for Corvese. That'll be a 2/2 with the potential to become so much more. Corvese going to play a Temple Garden before just simply passing the turn back here. Can he keep working his way through? He had the opportunity to play a Fleecemane line there and chose not to.
Maybe he's trying to set up one turn of Fleecemane Lion plus Monstrous, or trying to chain together multiple spells in a turn to try to push to the counterspell that Kurt has represented here on several turns.
Corvese going to untap here. 3 more soldier tokens in there for Crane. He's going to take a draw. Don't forget about that Mutavault in Crane's lands as well. That thing will be ready to block and mess up Brave the Elements as well.
It's a tough spot for Harry to pull through. That Mutavault makes Brave the Elements so much less effective, but we'll see what he's able to piece together.
Dissolves are pretty good now, too.
Yep. They were not good for a couple turns, but they are good now.
Corvese Gonna cast a Voice of Resurgence. Can't imagine that's gonna resolve. There's a dissolve.
Yeah, since Kurt's hand is nothing but counter spells at this point, makes a lot of sense to just counter straight away.
Looks like the Scry stayed on top. You have to be fearful that may be a Sphinx's Revelation. Corvese looks like he just has 2 cards left in his hand. The Burmaz and a Fleecemane Lion. Which one will he cast this turn, if any? Because he's still got to keep attacking.
He can't stop.
Yeah.
He cannot stop.
That's the tough thing here for him, is that he must keep attacking because, you know, you take that Warren turn off and then Elspeth will just mess up everything. But to be fair, Elspeth is making things pretty difficult as it is.
Yeah, he's trying to maybe navigate the game in such a place where Kurt assumes that he's safe, taps low, and then maybe Brid the Elements isn't out. But trying to attack on the ground through an Elspeth is very, very difficult to do.
I think it's tough to say yet. Am I supposed to fire at my Mutavaults or am I supposed to deploy more threats? It looks like he's going to go with fire at my Mutavaults and attack with everything here. Again, Crane just has 2 lands and dissolve in his hand.
Has to keep pressuring. This attack is not great, but Harry certainly cannot win the game by sitting on his heels.
Yeah, it's almost just like he has no choice.
Yeah. Trying to at least navigate the game into such a place that Kurt has the opportunity to make a mistake. And these attacks aren't all bad. I mean, Kurt does not have very much life to work with. It's hard for him to profitably double block anything because he can't really afford to take these hits. The Elemental token from Voice of Resurgence is lethal on its own right now.
Well, it looks like it's time to fire at Mutavault. So Mutavault's going to get in front of Mutavault. Are we just maybe going to see chump blocks all the way across? Yeah, okay. So it looks like 2 points of damage looks like it's going to come through here. Harry whittling things down. Reed Duke's going to die. You see a bunch of exchanges are going to take place here. And at the end, Harry will be left with 2 creatures. The Elemental token from Voice of Resurgence and the Mutavault.
And it's noteworthy now that Brave is good to go.
Except for that dissolve. That's
Yeah,
the
he's at least gotten to that point. Before dissolve wasn't even live on. Sorry, Brave wasn't even live on board before.
Yeah.
He's at least navigated the game to that spot.
And unsurprisingly, Crane's draw for the turn was a Sphinx's Revelation. He kept it so quickly with the Scry from Dissolve. Can't really surprise anybody. And it's funny because Harry has been on the other side of things. He's normally the one playing the Revelation deck. We've seen him win opens with Esper and blue-white control and just Revelation decks in general many times, as well as just top 8ing opens with that strategy. Now he's on the other end. And it's kind of interesting, too, if you think of what Crane did this game. The answer is not very much.
No, I mean, he played a dissolve at some point, you know?
A D-Sphere in Elspeth.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of interaction in the early parts of the game. You didn't have a Supreme Verdict or a Jace, which are so important for these blue-white control decks to have on the opening turns of the game as they make their way into the mid-game. None of that stuff happened.
It's where a lot of the power from these blue-white control decks come from, is your opponent has to play around stuff that's often not in your hand. Harry played this game showing a lot of respect for the possibility of Supreme Verdict, and it just never showed up.
Chances are it's going to show up in a little bit, though, because we're going to see a big revelation here from Crane, as this is a Burmaz.
I have to imagine Kurt is not going to fight over anything that doesn't cause Harry to kill him, basically.
Yeah. And you see him shrug his shoulders and say, yeah, that's fine. Follow-up play. There's Fleecemane Lion. And if he wasn't countering Burmaz, I can't imagine he's countering the Lion.
Yeah.
Sure, it can become monstrous, but again, when you have Elspeth in play, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, just double checking to make sure I can block with an Elspeth token.
Yep.
That's all I'm doing right now.
Well, he's going to counter this one. That's surprising to me. That is very surprising.
I mean, if Harry has Brave the Elements, that's just game.
No way. Oh, it's a try.
But see, this is what I was talking about. At least Harry led the game to a place where this mistake could occur.
Yeah.
I guess it wouldn't necessarily have been lethal because Kurt would have been forced to rev for 1, but at least the game's still going on.
Sure. if he's revving for 1, that's like a win.
Yeah.
I guess
He still might lose to Elspeth. Keep in mind, he still
yeah.
can lose to Elspeth, but it's something.
Yeah, so Dry Milton's going to come in and then attack here with the Voice of Resurgence Elemental token. It's a 3/3, so you see the triple block immediately. Jace the draw here for Crane. He's going to make 3 soldier tokens. And he still has the Revelation in his hand. He's going to drop Jace down now. He's getting very risky here. I mean, presumably he just has no idea that Brave isn't out in this situation.
Yeah, there's not a lot of green-white lists where you see it.
Yeah. Because he has opened the door to losing this card for a couple of turns.
And now Brave actually is lethal.
Yeah.
Because a rev for 1 does not save Kurt.
Obviously, if Harry had drawn it, he would have cast it right now. At least that's my. I mean, that's my.
Think about it for a bit, just make sure. And even if Harry isn't able to pull this one out, he's done a great job of at least getting the game to this spot. Oh my goodness.
Just fire at Mutavault. I was thinking the same thing. Here comes everybody. Trigger from Brumaz. Unfortunately for Harry, Jace did occur, so not at its best. Now, again, Harry might just be hoping that, okay, maybe Kurt misses the trigger. That's favorable for me. Just things like that. Looks like here comes some blockers. 2, 3. Just doing everything he can to try to get back in this game.
Yeah.
So there's some trades, some dust settles. What's this follow-up going to be? Locks on Smiter. Can't count that one anyway. Pass the turn back. Crane going to untap. He'll take a draw. Still has that Revelation. Detention Sphere is the card he picked up. Elspeth's going to tick up. 3 more soldiers.
And it's interesting, Kurt keeps drawing cards that are just good enough to prevent him from just revving.
Yeah.
If he draws a land at any point here, the game probably ends because Kurt goes rev and that might be it. But the Jace was just tempting enough last turn. It looks like Detention Sphere is not good enough here, but I said Detention Sphere almost looks like it could be good enough too.
Is it Brave the Elements?
Well, the ship might have sailed for Brave the Elements.
Mutavault's going to get fired up. Here we go again. Not entirely sure where these are going, but I have to imagine it's not towards the Planeswalkers.
Harry has not targeted a Planeswalker in 4 turns or 5 turns. I don't expect that to start happening now.
You know what? Now's a good time to go after Elspeth.
Now that it's up to 9, I'd really like to start whittling it down a little bit.
There's a Revelation. That'll be for 5. So Crane's going to go up to 7 and get 5 cards. And obviously Harry's not getting any work done with these attacks. Looks like he may have just drawn to another Revelation too. So there go the soldier tokens. This is a Dryad Militant. Pass the turn back.
And now the door may have shut.
Well, it's just kind of ironic, right? Where Harry has been on the other side of this before. He's been the one casting the Revelation to close the door. So, I think he will gamely continue to play on, but I think he also knows when it's over, too.
Yeah.
Since he's done this to just so many people over the course of, almost seems like the past year. Elspeth going to tick up to 10 now.
And now Kurt threatening to go ultimate with Jason, potentially win the game that way.
I don't get to see that one too often.
Which would be kind of awesome because Kurt could go get Dictate of Heliod out of Harry's deck, go ultimate with Elspeth, go get an Elspeth of his own, and start making some 5/5 flyers.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but
Jace trigger's going to happen here. A bunch of things are coming in. Harry going to do some blocking yet again.
Why pay 5 mana for Dictative Heliod when you can just play 1 more mana and get Elspeth?
That's so true.
Which is Dictative Heliod plus 3 tokens every turn.
That's true. There's another revelation. Will Harry keep trying to work through this? As the second revelation is going to happen here. Crane is going to go up now to 13.
Harry has an incentive to keep playing here. When he's working some time off the clock, it's more likely that he, it's going to be hard if the match goes to game 3, assuming Harry can win game 2. Then it behooves Harry to run a little bit of clock off at least.
Selesnya Charm here, +2/+2, and tramp on the locks on Smire, so some damage is going to come across.
That was another card that was an out on some of these turns.
Yeah,
that
I
I
forgot
had.
about those.
Yeah.
The entire time we were just thinking about Brave the Elements when that would have been another fantastic draw. So just making sure the game state and everything is appropriate. We'll see, just to make sure everything is everything's kosher here. We'll make sure we know exactly what's going on.
Yeah. So I believe it's the interaction of Brumaz against an opposing Jace that's ticked up.
Sure. Is it attacking for 1 or attacking for 0?
Mm-hmm.
That is quite the question.
And possibly if the trigger got announced at all.
Apparently from it looks like Brumaz tokens aren't -1/-0 by Jace since they are never declared as attackers.
Maybe it's the same rule, the same reason that Geist Saint Draft, the token attacks the player against a plus Gideon.
Sure.
I think it's the same. It's probably the same thing, I would imagine. It's not declared as an attacker. It's just put into play attacking.
Yeah. Just intuitive and not confusing. That's all I ask for in my Magic cards.
There are parts of Magic School's rule set that are as nuanced and complicated as like the tax code or any other parts of the nitty-gritty of any sort of legal system.
Trying to fly standby.
No
one actually knows how to do that.
But unlike the Magic rules, at least when you show up to the airport and you say, I'm trying to fly standby, someone will make an effort to help you as best they can. The Magic rules, quite different.
Yeah, you figure it out. We're going to bring it back to the booth here as these players do get a ruling. It looks like the head judge is going to get involved to make sure that everything is kosher here. What it looks like is that Kurt Crane's probably going to win that game regardless, but we'll see, obviously, how the cookie crumbles.
Well, if you look at Harry there, he's casting a Selesnya Charm. They're talking about whether or not, what's going on with that Jace. If that trigger got missed, and Harry's giving +2 and trample to his Smiter, it's possible there's a lethal attack coming across. Now, Kurt is in the middle of revving for a bunch, so I would be surprised. I'd be surprised if that actually killed him, but the game might have gotten a little bit closer than we were anticipating, given how the last few turns went.
Yeah, and he does have another revelation in his hand as well that we haven't even accounted for, which could be for 7 or 8, or some high number in the following turns, as well as the detentions or some other things. So it looks like Kurt Crane's probably going to win that game, but we'll obviously see what happens in the following turns. As far as the matchup is concerned, blue-white versus green-white. Haven't seen that one a lot over the past couple of months. The green-white deck is something that Harry, again, wrote about in the Select Side of Star City Games a couple articles ago. If you guys haven't checked that out, you certainly can do that and go through his archives. He's a pretty big fan of this deck. His deck is pretty straightforward, honestly. It's all creatures. Brave the Elements, all of his creatures are white except for Mutavault. And he's got 2 copies of Dictative Heliod, which is the 5 mana +2/+2 flash enchantment from Journey into Nyx, 3 Selesnya Charms, and 4 Banishing Lights. So pretty straightforward, aggressive stuff, and he's sitting at 6-1 with it right now.
But as opposed to a lot of commonly seen green light lists that we've had over the last couple of months, he's making some pretty big concessions to the control matchups. Usually they have access to Advent of the Worm. Advent's a very powerful tool against control decks. We've even seen main deck copies of Mistcutter Hydra to shore up that matchup a little bit. Yep. A lot of that has to do with the mono blue devotion matchup not being good either. And so Mistcutter Hydra appears for that reason as well. But Harry has none of those tools. He's just a curve of creatures. Nothing really even that tricky. Most of his threats are things like Brumaz and Loxodon Smiter. So his build's pretty susceptible to Supreme Verdict. The upside he gets here is that his threats are pound for pound as good as it gets. And I imagine he's a pretty big favorite in most creature matchups, especially because he has access to Brave the Elements, which can be a real breaker, especially against decks like Mono Blue Devotion. But the threat base that he has, with the exception of Voice of Resurgence, not well suited to fight Blue White Control or Esper. And you're seeing that first game, Kurt really didn't do anything of note. He didn't have a good Blue White draw. He just had Elspeth on turn 6 and a little bit of ability to defend himself. And it looks like Harry's essentially just losing to Elspeth.
Yeah, just straight up.
Yeah.
Because, again, he didn't do very much in the opening turns of the game. Elspeth came down and it just kind of changed everything. And Harry tried to slog his way through it by just firing at Mutavaults and just attack you. And Elspeth was just like, oh, some jump blocking and double blocking here. And, if you don't have a Selesnya Charm or Brave the Elements, then I'm probably going to be able to make my way through this. And that's basically what happened.
Yeah. Harry did work the game into a spot where Brave was lethal on a couple of turns there. So it's not like Elspeth was just game over on the spot when it showed up, but most of Harry's draw steps just don't do anything. He has, again, no copies of Advent of the Worm. He has no copies of his Ajani Caller of the Pride. These are tools that can give the green-white aggro deck some backdoor outs against an active Elspeth. He doesn't really have any of that stuff going on, and so Elspeth is really problematic for his list.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there was definitely some turns where Brave the Elements, Selesnya Charm, and we even forget the 4 copies of Banishing Light to actually just take out Elspeth.
Yeah.
Would have been timely to be able to get him to actually be able to close the door in this game. He just wasn't able to find those cards. And that's why chances are, again, it's not set in stone, but it looks like he's going to have some difficulty closing out this game, and Elspeth and Sphinx's Revelation and friends are going to take over. We'll see what happens in the sideboarding and all of that stuff. Harry's got some nice options with Mistcutter Hydra, among other things here, but not a lot of options against control decks. I mean, he's also got Deicide as well, but you're not going to find anything like Rootborn Defenses, which was a go-to card for green-white decks against blue-white, especially Pro Tour Dragon's Maze.
Yeah, those lists had Call the Conclave, Selesnya Charm, and Advent of the Worm. So a lot of really juicy populate targets in that list. And at Pro Tour's Dragon's Maze, it was just Supreme Verdict or Bust. That was all you were fighting over. And so Rootborn Defenses was great in that world, but the blue-white decks are a little bit more proactive. They are not all in on Supreme Verdict anymore. Although Rootborn Defenses still has spots of being plenty powerful.
So you see Crane's at 6 here, and it looks like the ruling was that... Well,
yeah.
Okay. So the warnings were assessed and all of that good stuff, so everything has been assessed correctly. As you see, Detention Sphere has been placed on a Loxodon Smiter.
And Kurt just trying to cast some of the spells in his hand, so he wanted to discard down to the hand size. He has the Dissolve in his hand to protect him from any sort of follow-up that Harry has. Another Supreme Verdict to refuel if we get to that spot. So
basically, we weren't going to tune into a game where Kurt Crane was at 0.
Yes.
I think that was basically impossible. And you see him sitting at 6 with looks like 7 or 8 cards in his hand. He might have to discard, he might not. You mentioned the Dissolve that he does have in his hand to make sure that nothing shows up to mess things up here. And after Elspeth does tick up to put 3 more tokens along with Jace, Corvese says, no more for me, thank you much. And Kurt Crane is going to win game number 1 here over Harry Corvese. Blue-white control, up a game against green-white aggro.
So you alluded a little bit to Harry's sideboard. What does he had to bring in here?
2 Keening Apparitions, 2 Deicides, 3 Mistcutter Hydras, 4 Unflinching Courage, 2 Giant Growth, a Glare of Heresy, and a Cetizen Tactics. A Cetizen Tactics, excuse me.
The tactics?
Well, the tactics aren't coming in
Some
here.
Some drastic tactics?
Yeah, the tactics aren't coming in here, my friend. I could definitely see Keening Apparition and Deicide coming in along with Mistcutter Hydra. That's the potential for 7 cards to come in, 8 if you count Glare of Heresy. But how many answers do you want to have to cards? How many answers do you want to have to cards like Detention Sphere and Vanishing Light? You don't want to be too heavy on that, I believe, even though these decks do rely on that kind of effect pretty heavily.
Yeah, you do still need to stay true to your base, which is getting on the board and attacking efficiently. Even if you have answers to their reactive stuff, eventually Sphinx's Revelation buries you.
Yeah.
And so you can only have so much of that stuff going on in your deck. On the other side here, Kurt, 2 copies of Nyx Fleece Ram, a Deicide, an Aetherling, 2 Gainsays, a Dispel, a Negate, a Pithing Needle, 2 Celestial Flares, a Blind Obedience, and 3 copies of Last Breath. A lot of this is going to depend on what he anticipates coming out of Harry's deck. For example, Dispel is very good against lists that are playing Rootborn Defenses and Advent of the Worm. Now we know that Harry has none of that going on in his list whatsoever, but Kurt doesn't necessarily know that. So we may see Dispel come in even though it's not very good against Harry's deck. I think the 2 copies of Nyx Fleece Ram are pretty good for this matchup. They do block pretty effectively, and Kurt's just trying to take control of the game. I don't know if he's going to want to go so far as to bring in Celestial Flares because Harry has a lot of low to the ground, pretty cheap threats. Although Celestial Flare is some insurance against Mistcutter Hydra, which he might be anticipating. Blind Obedience, kind of the same story here. Not necessarily at its best against Harry, but more insurance against Mistcutter Hydra. And 3 copies of Last Breath. Good answer to Voice of Resurgence. He saw Dryad Militant. He can expect Soldier of the Pantheon. possibly experiment one. So I expect more of the cheap removal to come in as well.
Yeah, wouldn't be so surprising at all. I think this is a pretty difficult matchup for Corvese, all things considered. I mean, we saw what happened in the last game where, you could make an argument that Crane didn't really do anything outside of casting Elspeth, and then that was good enough. Jace, Revelation, all that stuff came after the fact that Elspeth was beginning to dominate. Heaven forbid Crane actually does things in the early part of the game this go around, like a Supreme Verdict or a Jace or a Last Breath.
Well, Harry was playing the game trying to not expose himself too heavily to Supreme Verdict. So if Kurt had more action, it might have just induced Harry to follow up with some of his own stuff. I believe he had the Burmaz in his hand for quite a while that he just wasn't willing to play into what he felt was a likely Supreme Verdict. So even if Kurt had some early action, I think the game would have probably taken about the same pace because Harry was sandbagging some threats, anticipating a Supreme Verdict.
Poor Burmaz. It's just always been kind of disappointing thus far.
What do you mean?
I don't know. When you see a card like that, you expect it to be so much more powerful, and it was never really all that powerful. Never really. It hasn't really done what I think people expected it to do, which is be kind of like a format warper, or just a card that you cast it on turn 3. And it's like, you better kill this or you die right now. Kind of like what Pack Rat does. But, I mean, it's kind of hard to compare that card to Pack Rat. But at the same time, I think people were kind of expecting that level of card when they saw Burmaz of just like, my goodness, this card is completely bonkers. And that just doesn't seem to be the case at all.
I was not sold at the time.
Oh, I remember. I do remember. You thought that it was going to be a sideboard card for Revelation decks. And at the beginning, that's actually what it was. And people have even moved away from that and moved towards a creature that's actually kind of better in those matchups, which is Nightveil Spectre, which on the surface is a less powerful card than Burmaz.
Well, the decks that are good at blocking on the ground are really good at blocking on the ground, and the upside of Nightveil Spectre is actually higher in a lot of matchups.
Yeah. See both players going to draw their opening 7. Corvese will be on the play this game, down a game against blue-white control. Looks like he has kept. He's going to play a Mana Confluence and fire off with a Soldier of the Pantheon. Harry goes down to 19.
And this is a matchup where Harry does not mind drawing a lot of copies of Mana Confluence.
See a little scry action here from a Temple of Silence. You see Crane has a copy of Celestial Flare in his hand right now. That card looks like it's going to be pretty popular moving forward. I don't think anyone has much interest in losing to a Naya Hexproof deck.
We've seen a lot of them so far this weekend, that's for sure. I mean, way more than we saw in your average standard tournament over the last couple of months.
Temple of Plenty going to show up to the party here for Corvese. Scry's going to leave that on top. Attack for 2 is going to put Crane down to 18. We'll see if he has another play here. It looks like he does. And that's going to be a Dryad Militant before passing the turn back. Pretty important he has another play that turn, actually, just because of Celestial Flare, excuse me.
You just have to outpace their removal.
Yeah.
All of it matters.
This is a Hallowed Fountain. Crane going to go down to 16.
That's another pump of the fist there for Harry.
I would be thrilled.
He was only 2 points short last game, so.
Time to go attacking. And there's the flare. You gotta imagine it's gotta be Dryad Militant to get sacrificed, yeah. Because the text on Soldier of the Pantheon is actually relevant in this matchup.
It's good against Attention Sphere.
There's a Smiter. Passing the turn back over to Crane. Crane gonna draw his cards, Mutavault. You see him pull out Banishing Light very quickly in his hand. So there is that. Take care of the Smiter.
Militant has some really narrow application against Elixir of Immortality, but overall Soldier of the Pantheon definitely the stronger card.
Yeah, that's really about it.
Although Harry can target Dryad Militant with pump spells like Celestia Charm, and he can't necessarily do that with Soldier of the Pantheon all the time, but
Fire through Mutavault, attack for 4 is what Corvese is going to do. Put Crane down to 10. Follow up. Looks like he does have a 1-drop. I think we're going to see a Dryad Militant. Pass the turn back over to Crane, who does not have a 4th land in his hand, but he just ran one off. But it's a Temple of Enlightenment.
Not the land he was looking for.
Yeah. He's going to scry, leave that card right on the top. Very fast scry there for Crane. Corvese is going to draw a card. See what he wants to do on this turn. This is where things get a little bit more difficult here. Opponent has 3 mana available. Could block with Mutavault. Could cast Azorius Charm. Could cast Last Breath. Do you want to expose your Mutavault in this situation? It looks like the answer is yes.
Yeah, I think Harry can't stop attacking. I know there's some cards that Kirk can have here that makes exposing your Mutavault bad or whatever, but Harry cannot win the game by being conservative. He may even have to push a little bit further into a Supreme Verdict this turn, because how good is that dry melt in his hand going to be on the how good is it going to be on the way left over?
You see, I think this game Harry has another copy of Vermass in his hand that he is sandbagged. That he has just not been willing to tap out for. Like on turn 3, you have the option between Lockdown and Smiter and Vermass. He chose to go with Smiter, which I'm fine with, but the follow-up turn, he just fired a Beauty Vault and then played another 1-drop, where he could have just played Vermass that turn. Again, probably scared of getting hit by Verdict.
I think that I would rather have the Smiter in hand, because in any event, the most likely scenario is that something's just getting detention sphered the next turn. And in that world, I would rather have the Smiter left over in my hand, because the Smiter can't be countered, and there could be a spot down the line where Kurt's defense is a dissolve, and then the Smiter resolves. And the clock is pretty similar in the event that Kurt's answer is Jace or Verdict, because Vermass hits once, and then everything gets swept away.
Second copy of Mana Influence going to come in. Corvese does have access to a Glare of Heresy in his hand. He's just not going to cast it, though.
Yeah, he's got the read that Kurt's going to be casting Supreme Verdict this turn.
It's pretty soon. Here's another Temple. Top card to the bottom. Will it be Verdict or will it be Jace? It will be Verdict. So those are going to die.
Can't really mess around here, trying to get too fancy by casting a Jace.
Yeah. Getting Apparition to draw here.
Getting Apparition's a really nice draw.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. There's Glare Heresy. You're going to get the Smiter back. Follow-up. Looks like he's got another spell to play. The question is, does he want to play it? You see the other Verdict there in Crane's hand, along with looks like 2 copies of Jace Architect, I thought. We don't know the top card of his deck.
I think sandbagging here is pretty rough when your opponent could simply play a 6 land and Elspeth next turn.
And you're just dead again.
Just got to cast your stuff.
Yeah, hope for no second Verdict, right?
This is what happens against the blue-white control list. You rarely have the luxury of playing around everything.
I agree.
So you just got to pick your spots.
You can only bob and weave so much.
Yep.
There's another Verdict.
It's fine when you're so far ahead that you have the luxury of playing around things, but that's rarely the case. You just have to be willing to live in the reality where if they have all the stuff, you're going to lose the game. But you can win the games where they only have some of it.
Yeah. 2 mana. There's Keening Apparition. Pass the turn back. Crane will take a draw. It's a copy of Sphinx's Revelation. Things are getting ugly now.
If he does tap out for this Jason plus it, though, I mean, his defenses are down. There's some chance of something weird happening.
Yeah.
Can't block with the Mutavault.
He's trying to figure out exactly how he wants to tap here and how he's going to want to use his Jace. It's going to come in. See if it's going to tick up or down. It's going to go up. Well, Harry has a Banishing Light in his hand, so he can take care of that. And basically, Jace will have had no effect. So that's at least kind of a win. There's a Plains. Going to take 1, going to go down to 18. There is Banishing Light.
Yeah, turns like this are small victories for Harry, where he gets to trade resource for resource, get a little bit of damage in, and shut off Kurt's access to card advantage.
So we'll see if Crane remembers the Jace trigger or not before passing the turn back.
Yeah, the Jace trigger still occurs even if Jace is not in play when combat occurs.
Yeah, but it still must be announced.
Correct.
That's the thing, because it is your Jace trigger. And it looks like he did remember, so Crane's at 5. See his hand right now. There's an Azorius Guildgate. And that's a Jace. That's a tick up. Corvese going to untap. He's going to take a draw. Does he have another Banishing Light here?
Shields are again down. In this spot, something like 2 copies of Celestia Charm is game if Harry left that kind of stuff in his deck. trying to fight blue-white aggro with green-white aggro when you don't have any of the cheat cards in your deck, like Mistcutter Hydra and Advent of the Worm, Ajani, it's really tough.
It seems really, really hard, yeah. I mean, Brave the Elements is obviously great, but it's actually arguably at its worst in this particular matchup.
Yes.
Better against the other creature decks and stuff like that for the Falter effect.
If a sea of random creatures with good power to mana ratios were good against blue-white control, we would see more creature decks that were random sea of creatures with good power to mana ratios.
Basically going to take one more. Banishing Light again. Attack for one we go. Trigger the Jace. Crane goes down to 4. And even though he's not getting use out of his Jaces, he's still got to be pretty happy with these exchanges because this is just buying him more time to get to Revelation.
Yeah. And Kurt drew an untapped land this turn, which is about the best draw besides Elspeth he could hope for here.
2 mana. There's a voice. This is a Revan response. That'll be for 4. Crane's going to go up to 8. But more importantly, he's going to draw 4 cards.
Harry is by no means dead, but he is in trouble.
And Elspeth has been added to that grip. That's a really, really good rev. Was Elspeth Verdict the last breath in the land?
Okay.
That is a fantastic
Pretty close to
revelation.
as good as you could draw it up.
Yeah. There's a Temple of Plenty. Corvese going to take a look at the top card. We'll see where he wants to place it, but what he doesn't know, or what maybe he does know, given his experience playing Revelation decks, is that this one is probably over for him. It's just too much to overcome. It's one thing to pace the game with the green-white deck, but it's also at the same time there isn't really much bobbing and weaving to be done. You just kind of have to put your foot to the floor and hope they don't have the appropriate cards lined up, as you did mention.
Yeah, he gets punished for being fast by Supreme Verdict. He gets punished for being slow by Elspeth and Jace. So it's really hard to beat everything.
Last Breath is going to take care of the voice. Elspeth going to probably take care of Harry's chances of winning the game.
Yeah, we've seen this before.
It was good pre-board. It was good pre-journey to Nyx. It's good post, too. Harry going to draw his card and just pass the turn back. Crane going to untap. He'll take a draw. Picks up a Hallowed Fountain. You see the Verdict of Dissolve in the Detention Sphere. Looks like it's time for Elspeth to run away with this one too, Patrick.
Yep. Yes, it does.
Feeling so good, he's going to attack. Corvese going to take 3.
Bold.
Going to take 2. Okay, I wasn't sure if he blocked or not, but just did announce the block. 3 soldiers are going to come in here. Hallowed Fountain going to come into play tapped. Pass the turn back. Corvese going to play a Mutavault here. Pass the turn back. The D-Sphere could take care of those Banishing Lights, which would bring back both Jaces, and then Crane would have to choose which Jace he wants to keep. That play is definitely available to him. Or he could just draw a Jace and ignore everything I just said.
Yeah.
Which makes life so much easier.
Or do nothing but plus Elspeth for the rest of the game and win that way.
Yeah.
A lot of different roads.
That'll work too. Here's Jace number 3. Place those conveniently on top of those Banishing Lights.
Let him know who the boss is.
Both the Planeswalkers will tick up. 3 soldier tokens are coming. He still has that Dissolve on reserve just in case anything goes wrong. Just going to pass the turn back over to Corvese, who will draw a card.
No shame in tapping. There's no shame.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But why tap when you can fire at Mutavault? Had you considered that? Had you considered that?
We all have to make our own way in the world, you know? We all got to be happy with how we're living, you know?
It's ironic only because Harry has been the other guy. Harry has been Kurt Crane so many times in this situation of just, you can't do anything. Just tap out. But they gamely play on.
Yeah.
Bunch of blocks here. And dust will settle in just a moment. Corvese is going to end up losing what looks to be his team, assuming the Jace trigger was announced.
Yeah, if I'm Kurt, I just block with a bunch of different stuff.
Everything everywhere.
So you don't have to worry about pump spells.
Yeah, Corvese knows it's over. He's going to concede the game. Kurt Crane's going to win this match over here. Corvese 2-0. Blue-white control gets the job done over green-white aggro. Still not sure how great of a choice Revelation decks were this particular weekend, but at the end of the day, Revelation decks are still Revelation decks. They're still good. They can still win, and that's what Kurt Crane was able to do right there.
Well, Kurt's deck does not have a lot of main deck funkiness, metagaming stuff going on here. I mean, it's 4 Azorius Charm, 4 Dissolve, you know, the only a 5th Detention Sphere and Banishing Light. Really, you're only looking at a main deck that